National Federation of the Blind. Live the life you want.
My name is Karen Anderson, and I serve as Education Programs Coordinator for the National Federation of the Blind. And I am thrilled that we have so many people here today to check out this lesson. The National Federation of the Blind is the oldest and largest organization of blind people across the country. And we are really working to make sure that we support our blind students and our teachers of blind students through all of this unprecedented stuff that we are experiencing now. I'm very excited to have Emily Gibbs here with me to present this particular lesson. And I think it's going to be something that's going to serve all of us really well as we work with our beginning Braille students. So Emily, feel free to take it away.
Great. Thank you, Karen. My name is Emily Gibbs, and I'm the Director of Youth and Education Services for the National Federation of the Blind of Texas. I'm also a TBI, and I've worked in several different states as a certified TBI. And I'm really happy to be here. I think that Braille and especially kind of basic tracking is really something that we need, and it's something that's really easy to practice at home if you have basically anything. I am willing to sit and talk, but please, if you have any questions, if you have any comments, please feel free to jump in. I think that we have a wealth of knowledge here today, and I would love it to be a conversation. When you're thinking about tracking, what you really want to first think about is your students' tactile sensitivity, because there's a wide variety of materials that you can use. There's also a wide variety of ways that they can track and what you want to work on. So I'm going to start making suggestions from students who might need bolder lines or something that's very, very tactically discriminative to track, something that's big and bold so they have a very easy time with it. And so when I was thinking about this, I wanted to think about things that I could find in my house. I have some stuff that is a little more specialized too, and I'll show you at the end. But this is stuff that I sat at my kitchen table and I thought, what do I have right around here that would make a great tracking sheet? Because right now, it's hard to get stuff from the stores. We were just talking about how nobody can get flour. We can't go out to stores. So what do you already have in your house that you can use? So the first thing, and all of my glue is hot glue, because that's what I had. But you can also use Elmer's glue. I found glue sticks don't necessarily work as well for some things, but you can definitely use a glue stick. You could use super glue, pretty much any glue that you have. I just happen to have hot glue, and that's what we're doing, right? So this first tracking sheet, is I used yarn, and I hot glued yarn to a piece of paper. And so these yarn, it's very, very thick, and so it would be very easy for a student to track. And so this would be for a beginning Braille reader. You want to be able, you're teaching, the tenets of left to right, top to bottom. And I made the lines very easy to track too. So you can see they're straight, and there's no, they go up and down and across the page. I did one a little bit farther down that is broken, but it still, the breaks are small. And so this is for a student who maybe is starting to understand left to right, but is having trouble keeping their hands together or stretching their fingers out. And so there's different lines for different kind of techniques. So whether you want them to make sure that they're leading with their pinky, this is just, someone asked what kind of paper I use. This is printer paper, because that's what I had on hand. Really, you can use, I have some cardstock I was going to show a little bit later, and that works too. Hold on one second. Children, I am in a meeting. I cannot answer the door. Go away, please. Sorry. Someone's knocking kind of pretty insistently behind me. And so I just use printer paper. Pretty much any paper would work, because, especially for something that you're glued on like this, because it doesn't have to be really sturdy. If you're doing something where you're embossing on the Braille, you want something sturdier so it will last. But these printer paper works fine. And so then my next two lines, I have a piece of spaghetti, and then I have some beans. And so again, this would be something for someone who is just starting out. Thanks. Thank you, Andrew. I appreciate that. And so they can moving across the page. And these, some fun games you could play is if you wanted to make a line with string and then add a bean to the string, you could have the student count how many beans are there. And that would be, and so you could glue, 2 beans on the first line, 1 bean on the second line. And so they had to search for the beans. I do a game like that in Braille quite often for my students.
Oops.
It looks like there is a glare over top of that sheet. What is on the top of that sheet?
So on the top is yarn. It's a silver yarn. Is this better? Have I tilted a little bit?
No, I mean, it looks like it's like a, kind of like a plastic film, like a photo book type thing.
Nope, it's
over
just
top.
printer paper. There's nothing, no film. There's no, nothing else. It's just printer paper, hot glue, string,
I think what you're
spaghetti and a
seeing is
bean.
shadows from. I think that what you're seeing is shadows from the window light.
Yeah, my computer
Okay.
does face a window and there's blinds, and so that's why I sometimes have stripes on my
Yeah.
face, depending on how the sun goes.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
the stripes that we're seeing on the paper.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah, so you can see it right down here. It's just stripes from my blinds. I didn't have any, but yeah, great example of what students encounter is glare. And that's one of the reasons why when you are doing tracking or doing something like this, you want to make sure that your students are, maybe wearing sleep shades, wearing learning shades, or maybe doing it in a Braille box so they're not looking at their hands, because, we want them to learn non-visually. We want them to learn how to track without looking at it. And so glare, which can affect a lot of people, isn't going to be a concern. I thought about different kinds of string. I only had this thick yarn, but you could also use pretty much anything you had. If you had twine, or if you had, I thought about using aluminum foil or wax paper. I don't have any of that in stock, but really anything that you can make a thick line with works for Braille, for beginning Braille readers. There's not, anything specific to this. See, someone says you're always looking for a way to integrate O&M with Braille literacy. Boxes, U-shapes. Yep. And this, if you wanted to practice that as well, you could also practice making maps with these materials. And so they would have to track and trace the maps. And that's a great way to integrate both O&M and Braille. So for my second page, I got a little bit, I guess, less creative. For the bottom, I just used hot glue. So if I didn't have any string or beans or spaghetti, they're a little bit messier because my hot glue gun. But you could also use Elmer's glue for this. Elmer's glue, when you just trace on the paper, it makes great lines. And again, I have a straight line, I have a wiggly line, I have a dotted line, and all of those serve different purposes. And at the top of the paper, I don't know if you can see this, this is a lot less tactically discriminatory, but I use tape. And so the tape is shiny. Here, you can see that, blinds. The tape is shiny on the paper, so you can see it there. And it feels different than the paper, but it feels a lot less different than, say, spaghetti or yarn. And so it's harder to track, harder to trace. And so this would be for a more advanced student. I mean, I'm not talking, so someone who has maybe mastered tracing on spaghetti, has mastered tracing on yarn, but they're still not quite tracing Braille correctly. And so to teach them to have a light touch and to teach them to really focus on what's under their fingers. And so it's just white tape. I didn't go out to my garage, but I thought about using packing tape as well, because this tape is better for students who are more advanced in their tactile awareness but still need practice tracking. Thanks, Mary Noel. And so this It's Scotch tape, and so Scotch tape kind of has a satiny feel, where packing tape has a plasticky feel, and so they both feel different, so you could use both. And I'm not sure you could tell, but like there we go. The top line is straight, and then I did a dotted line in tape, and then I did a pointy line in tape. So again, those 3. And so my next one is probably the least tactically discriminatory that I did, but I think it's really important because students are going to use this all the time. So this is crayon. How would you introduce this activity? So I might, if students have never tracked before, I would talk about moving, when we read, we move our hands from left to right, and we use both of our hands, and we start at the top. And so I would have them start out by looking for the very top of the paper, and then the beginning of the line. And so you would need to have all of those skills first before you even track left to right. But then, if your student is familiar with those skills, I would talk about, we're going to practice tracking today. And as a parent, I would probably introduce something like, every line you track, if you follow it from the beginning to the end, I would put a goldfish or a piece of candy at the very end of the line to make it motivating. Because I don't know about you, but I've been having as a parent, not necessarily as a teacher, but I have a much easier time working with my students at school than I do with my own kids at home. And I think that's something I've heard from a lot of parents, is that it's hard to work with your kids, because
I don't homeschool.
I'm sorry? I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Teachers then.
Okay.
Oh, this is Andrea. I thought I was on mute, but my son's up here who's 15, and absolutely, it's way easier to teach other people's kids than.
Right.
So I told him, I'm like, do you hear that?
So I found that every little kind of bit of external motivation I can build in when I'm doing the lessons at home is so important. Crystal says she used physical items like a bookshelf and track the shelves when she's when they're talking about how to track. Exactly, but so if I was doing this at home with my student, with one of my kids, I might put a goldfish or a Skittle or M&M at the end of every line. So every line that they track from left to right, they get something to eat, because gosh knows they like to eat all day long. And that would help with that too. And so I would definitely kind of build in a reward system to every single one of these lines. But the reason why I think that crayon is really important is because as they get older, I like to have a lot of my students use crayon to mark answers on pages, because it's really readily available. So if they are working with a Braille sheet that has multiple choices, they can circle, A, B, C, or D in Braille with a crayon. They can feel the crayon, and then their teacher can see the answer that they circled. And so using a tracking sheet with crayon is the first kind of way to start teaching them to feel for the crayon, because crayon does feel very different on paper, but it's very subtle. Oh, that's a great idea. Crystal says that you can do points for each line and that bigger prize at the end. It just depends on the student. So if they need that, those rewards that are much more close together, you could do a reward at each line. If not, you could do a reward at the end. And so for the crayon, I did kind of a different variety of lines. You can see I did a long line, a dotted line. I do like to do a line that has a big break in the middle, because I think that teaches them to continue to look farther with their fingers. And yes, crayon is harder than tape, because tape is wider and it feels much, much different than the paper. Crayon is skinnier and subtler. Here I did a dotted line with mountains.
Emily, this is Karen, and the other reason that I think having a line with a break in the middle is important is because it starts getting students ready to look at things like graphs and tactile graphics, where things aren't necessarily directly next to each other, all of these
Absolutely.
skills sort of build on each other.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so, so this would be for, would you still do tracking worksheets for kids like this for kids who are sighted but learning Braille later in life? Yes, absolutely. I think that tracking is one of the prerequisites for learning Braille. So if your kids are having trouble with tracking, they're not going to be able to read Braille because they're not going to be able to track from left to right. So I did crayon. You can also do pen if you press hard enough, because ink pen will work. This is, I have this right now. So I have here a tactile blackboard. This is something you might not have at home, but I wanted to show it because it's very easy and very low tech. Is anyone familiar with this before I flip it over? So it's a sensational blackboard. You can get them at, I'm going to show you the link. It's backwards, sensationalblackboard.com. But you flip it over and it is just like a rubber material. And so when you put a regular piece of paper on it, it draws with a pen, and it draws lines that are raised. Let me get a pen so I can show you. But I had one sitting right here. There it is. So I put my paper on my sensational blackboard. I draw a line. You heard it, and it becomes a very nice raised line. There you go. You can see. And so it's kind of digging into the paper and making a line that's both visual and very tactile. And so this is great for making tracking sheets, but it's also really great for just letting students draw and play. So I wanted to mention it because it's very
How much is one of those blackboards?
it costs $30, I believe.
Thank
I
you.
think it's 50 now.
Is it 50 now? I haven't
I
bought
think
one for
so.
a couple of years. Sorry.
Yeah. Carlton,
Go ahead, Carlton.
I just want to, you may have hit on it earlier, I didn't catch in my brain, but a problem I had with a student teacher of mine at one point is she was letting her students have their fingers point every which way but loose, and they were practicing flashcards or tracking. And it's so vital to have the fingers well, the long part of the finger as if it's coming out of the belly button. So if that's parallel or perpendicular, whatever, to the child's body. So tracking is important, but the finger positioning is like
Right.
you don't get any tracking points unless your fingers are right.
Right. And so someone asked about Wicky sticks. Absolutely, Wicky sticks are great for tracking. I just don't have any in my house. And so I was trying to think of things that I actually had right here on hand. And so yes, some other items that would work would be pipe cleaners, sewing rack, Wicky sticks, really anything that you have in your house that you can glue to a piece of paper. Becky tells her students to point to the top of the page. That's correct. Yep. I'm trying to figure out a way that I can hold the paper. So this is kind of proper tracking hand positioning. All right, someone else suggests to ask your physical therapist for DISM. It works in a pinch on a hard surface as a substitute for the blackboard. That's great, and it also makes it so the paper doesn't move. Do I clip the top corner for orientation to the top? I don't usually, but you definitely could do that because it's not, it's strips. It's not, I mean, you could read one of these from either direction. So it doesn't really matter what the top is. You could read it like this, or you could read it like this. Does anyone know a good song to remember finger positioning? That's a great question. I don't, but someone should write one. APH happy face stickers at the end of the line for motivation. Yep, those are great too if you have them. Or if you, any foam stickers would work. And you could probably get some foam stickers maybe while you're grocery shopping. That might be possible.
Carlton?
Go ahead, Carlton.
I can't read the chat work on my phone, so I apologize. Also, I was thinking pennies at the end and then put them in a jar or piggy bank.
Yep.
And then at the end of the day or another day, trade them in for nickels and dimes. And then we can throw in some extra skills there too.
Absolutely. That's a great suggestion because probably you have pennies in your house too. All right, and so for my last one, again, this is getting into a little bit higher tech because I wanted to have some suggestions for things if you do have a Braille writer, if you do have some equipment at your house. Let's see, you can literally use anything to make lines. Yes, paths from candy canes, from pencils. Someone has used a foam board in substitute for the blackboard as well. Karen's mom used a tracing wheel. So Tiffany's asking what kind of paper I used when I used crayon. I just used regular printer paper. Caitlin uses the song "Where is Thumbkin" to increase finger awareness and talk about how the hands are positioned. That's great. Thank you. So we went through kind of a bunch of stuff glued to a piece of paper or just glue or crayon or tape. And then we talked about the blackboard. And so this last one is a traditional tracking sheet. And so I wanted to do one of these for parents. There we go. I wasn't sure how many TVIs or how many parents would be on this call, but this is kind of a typical traditional tracking sheet. I like to hide full cells in a line of 2 dots, 2, 5. Because then I kind of make a game of it. And so they have to count the full cells and tell me how many full cells are in at the end of each line. Or how many full cells are on the full piece of paper. So again, you can do big breaks or little breaks. And you know, pretty much there's no exact or right way to do it. There is no right or wrong way to make a Braille tracking sheet. It's all about personal preference, what you have on hand, and what you're trying to teach. All right, so someone's saying that they have the mini sensational blackboard for $30, and sometimes putting sandpaper under paper and crayon makes it more tactile. That's absolutely right. Yep, if you're not going for subtle, you could also put a piece of screen underneath it, like window screen, and that would also make it be much, much more tactile with crayons. Do I start the full Braille cells within lines of 2-5 when I'm starting raised lines of other materials? Yes, I think it's a great way to practice tracking. Instead of full cells, if you're working on letters, you can also put a letter in a line of 2-5s. So then you could talk about finding that letter or finding that person. Sometimes for really little kids, we talk about, like, we'll use the letter M and I'll say, all right, well, today we're going to find mommy in the maze. And so we do a maze and we look for mommy, which is the letter M. Or, you know, if they have a favorite teacher or a favorite friend, we use that letter. And that's one way that we practice tracking kind of letter awareness at the same time. When you're looking for letters, Becky makes a story and finds D or duck. Yep. So you can do that too. So these are great examples if you happen to have a Braille writer at home. You don't have to have a Braille writer at home to practice tracking, but if you do, you can make your own sheets. Are there any other questions? Carlton, Crystal, do you have any other suggestions?
This is Miguel. Shoelaces might work as well, right?
I'm sorry?
Shoelaces or shoelaces?
Oh, absolutely. Any kind of string. So shoelaces would work just fine if that's what you happen to have. And I think that the most important thing during this time period where we're all kind of at home is like the need to be creative and to need to kind of see what we have here and make it work. And that's really what I wanted us to do. Sorry, go ahead.
This is Amanda George. Also, puffy paint could work as well.
Absolutely. So if you have that at home, that would absolutely work. Erica says that 2 of her students have hemiplegia and they can't track with 2 hands and keep drifting. So any suggestions to keep them on a line or just keep practicing? So they're having difficulty tracking with 2 hands. Have you ever tried them with just 1 hand? I mean, obviously 2 hands is what we're looking for, but if sometimes students with motor difficulties, they are only able to track with 1 hand. And if they can stay online with 1 hand, they only use 1 hand, but still drifting with 1 hand. All right, I would suggest that you practice kind of getting them to use their pinky as the lead, because their pinky can keep them online if their pinky is still touching letters. That's what I always suggest to my students, is that their pinky is kind of like the boss of the hand when it goes across, and it tells them where to go. Any other suggestions about how to track with 1 hand?
Crystal?
Mhm.
Hey, we use a similar kind of thing with the pinky and the ring finger. So sometimes we call them the detective fingers.
Oh, that's good.
They're detecting the lines. You know, they're not actually the like leader that's reading, but they're our backup and keeping us in our spot.
See, there was a whole bunch of questions between that and there. You could definitely have children make their own with beans and rice and tell them to line up their friends. That would be great. That and that would also kind of teach tracking, but also teach how to make tactile graphics, which is also something that's huge need for our students. Pipe cleaners, popsicle sticks, buttons. Yep, those will all work.
Hey, this is Miguel again. If you do have a Brailler, the TVI I work with on my Braille transcriber, you had me create a row of X's connected together, so when it comes out, it's like just 2 lines, or some lines, and then there's letters. We put letters in between, like the gaps you're talking about. And just really quick, I know it's kind of silly, but I tell the kids to follow. It's like railroad tracks. I tell them to follow the railroad tracks until you find the letter, and just trying to make it fun for them.
Absolutely, that's fantastic. I've also said, depending on what the kids' interests are, I'm calling them railroad tracks. I've called them race cars before, because my student was really into cars, and so he really wanted to follow the race cars.
This is Amanda again. I'm a vision rehab therapist, and I work with the senior population, and I do teach Braille. I use the APH curriculum for, teaching tracking and things like that. It's kind of what I do.
Andrea had a really good point, is that you can make these for your students and mail them free matter for the blind. Some suggestions may fare better in the mail. String and glue versus popsicle sticks. But that's a great point, is that if your parents aren't able to make these things, you can make things and mail them for free. I really love hearing from everybody. This is some great suggestions, and I feel like I've learned a lot today too. Crystal has posted some maze pictures for everyone, so you can see some different mazes. She made some really neat ones. Any other questions or comments? Tiffany asks,
sorry, go ahead.
Tiffany asks, how are you watching to make sure students are tracking correctly while distance learning, especially new Braille students? That's a very good question. So I don't really have any experience doing that yet, because I haven't done distance learning with students, but I would assume that I would have the parent tilt the camera towards their hand. I think it's less important to see students' faces than it is to see their hands when you're doing Braille work with them. Penelope suggests video on cell phones or iPads, have them take a picture and post it to Seesaw. Any other suggestions about how you are making sure people doing it correctly? A Zoom meeting with the parent.
Carlton?
Go ahead, Carlton.
I would just actually position the camera from the beginning so that I can see hands and body of everybody, not unlike I do in person. I'm not touching the child while I'm teaching tracking, except that sometimes I model the tracking and ask the child to put his or her hands on top of mine. And I can show I can talk an adult through that before the lesson. And if we needed modeling, then perhaps an adult could come in and do that modeling.
Mm-hmm.
We might need to be more creative with our timing. We might need to do our service provision evening when parents aren't working, but we're creative. It's okay.
Penelope says they're using Zoom and it's working really well. Some of the parents are there and they're a great help. And Seesaw has video as well. But that's a great question because technique is so important. And if you're not there in person, how do you really correct technique?
M6.
Any final questions for the day?
Hi, you said it would be recorded. Where will the link be? Will it be on the NFB resources?
It will be on the NFB resources, and it will also be on our YouTube channel, which you can find by going to YouTube and searching for Nations Blind.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to thank all of you for joining us for this Zoom lesson. Thank you, Emily, for presenting. You did a tremendous job. We have these Zoom lessons every Thursday at 11 o'clock. And next week, we're going to be celebrating National Picnic Day by talking about how we can use picnics, even if they're on our living room floor, to sort of build on blindness skills in a really fun way. So I hope you guys will tune in for that. You can find all of the distance education resources that we're putting up, and we are putting new things up every day by going to our webpage, nfb.org/resources/distance-education-resources, or you can find that link in the chat because it is very long. I hope that you will all subscribe to our YouTube channel. And I hope that you will also consider, those of you who are teachers, I hope that you will consider joining our Professionals in Blindness Education Division. And we also have a Facebook group. Emily and Crystal are both members, as am I, and we would love to have you. Those of you who are parents, we hope that you'll consider joining our National Organization of Parents of Blind Children. Carlton is the president of that, and I know she would be thrilled to talk to you. And I would also love to get in touch with you. Again, my name is Karen Anderson, and I'm the Education Programs Coordinator for the National Federation of the Blind. You can get in touch with me by emailing K Anderson, so KANDERSON @nfb.org. Or you can call me by calling 410-659-9314. And my extension is 2243. So I'd love to hear from you. I would love to know what kinds of resources you want us to be putting out, whether you're a teacher or a parent. What would you like to see us do in these Zoom lessons? You know, the whole point is to make sure that we're putting things out that are useful for you. So please reach out and let me know. And unless Emily has anything else, I look forward to seeing all of you next week.
All right, so someone asked about the teacher Facebook group, and so I've just posted it in the chat.
Fantastic.
Right. Thank you also for coming. I really enjoyed being with you today.
Connect with us. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at NFB_voice. And like us on Facebook by searching for National Federation of the Blind. Visit our website at nfb.org or call us at 410-659-9314.